The thing about the universe, the real, actual, sprawling mess of it, with all its supposedly enlightened civilizations and their fancy faster-than-light engines, was that everyone thought they had it figured out. 10,000 species spread across 42 galaxies, all convinced they understood the natural order of things. Predators sat at the top, prey huddled at the bottom, and everyone else sorted themselves somewhere in between based on how many teeth they had, how thick their armor plating was, or how inventively they could kill something before breakfast. It was a simple system, elegant even, and it had worked perfectly fine for about 4 million years. Then humans showed up and ruined everything. Not intentionally, mind you. Humans rarely did anything intentionally on the galactic stage, except eat foods that would kill most carbon-based life forms and ask uncomfortable questions at diplomatic functions. They had stumbled into the greater galaxy roughly 60 years ago, when one of their primitive colony ships accidentally fell through a wormhole they did not even know existed, and popped out near a Zeltharian trading post. The Zeltharians, being generous souls with a robust sense of humor, had not immediately vaporized the primitive vessel. Instead, they had made first contact, shared the location of the nearest hyperspace lane, and then spent the next 6 decades giggling behind their manipulator appendages at everything humans did. Because humans were, by every measurable standard, ridiculous. They came from a death world. That much was obvious from their initial biological scans. Gravity at 1.2 standard G, atmospheric oxygen levels that would give most species heart palpitations, weather patterns that included frozen water falling from the sky, and wind that could peel the hide off a Gorvan battle tank. The place was a nightmare. And humans had not just survived it. They had built civilizations on it, then got bored and started playing games where they intentionally threw themselves out of aircraft for entertainment. But here was the thing that really baffled the galaxy. Despite coming from a world that was actively trying to kill them every moment of every day, humans were soft, physically soft. No natural armor plating, no venomous fangs, no razor-sharp claws or bone spurs or acid sacs. Their skin tore if you looked at it wrong. They broke bones doing something called jogging, which apparently they did voluntarily. They needed 8 hours of unconsciousness every single day, or they started hallucinating. The galaxy had seen the preliminary reports and collectively decided humans would make excellent administrative assistants, possibly acceptable technicians, and definitely terrible warriors. Which brings us, finally, gratefully, to the Crucible of Fang. The Crucible was not just any arena. It was the arena, the jewel of Station Korvax Prime, a massive orbital platform that existed for exactly one purpose: organized violence. 73 levels of seating surrounded a combat floor, large enough to host a small war, all of it shielded by energy barriers strong enough to contain a tactical nuclear detonation. Which had happened. Twice. Both times during championship matches, and both times the shields had held, which the arena's marketing division never let anyone forget. Every species with even a passing interest in martial prowess sent their champions here. The fights were broadcast across 42 galaxies. Fortunes changed hands on the betting floors. Reputations were forged in the blood-stained sands, and warriors who triumphed in the Crucible found themselves elevated to living legend status. Their names spoken with reverence in military academies and whispered in fear by anyone with a functioning survival instinct. Today's main event had drawn a crowd of roughly 200,000 spectators, which was impressive considering the station's maximum capacity was 190,000. Fire codes were more like fire suggestions in this part of space. The attraction was simple. Vex Tharek the Rendered, undefeated champion of the Heavy Combat Division, was scheduled to fight his 50th consecutive match. 50-0. Not 50 wins with a handful of defeats mixed in, 50 straight victories, most of which had ended with his opponent in multiple pieces. Vexitharak belonged to a species called the Korthax, and the Korthax had evolved on a planet where the food chain was less of a chain and more of a blood-soaked free-for-all. They stood roughly 3 meters tall, massed about 400 kilograms of muscle and bone, and possessed 4 arms that ended in claws capable of shearing through standard military-grade armor plating. Vexitharak himself was considered exceptional even by Korthax standards. His exoskeleton bore the scars of 1,000 fights, ritual markings that designated him as a rendered, a warrior who had consumed the hearts of 10 defeated champions. His lower arms could punch through reinforced bulkheads. His upper arms could tear a combat mech in half. His jaw could bite through a support beam. And his disposition, according to everyone who had ever met him, made a rabid wolverine look like a therapy animal. The bookmakers had stopped offering odds on whether he would win. Instead, they were taking bets on how long his opponent would survive. The over-under was currently set at 90 seconds, and the smart money was on the under. Then the opponent entered the arena, and the entire station went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the kind that happens when something dramatic occurs and everyone holds their breath in anticipation. This was the awkward kind of quiet, the kind that happens when someone shows up to a formal dinner wearing a bathrobe, and everyone is trying to figure out if it is an elaborate joke or a complete breakdown. Because walking across the sand, looking for all the universe like she had just wandered away from a recreational facility, was a human female. She stood maybe 1.7 meters tall. She massed perhaps 60 kilograms if you included her equipment, which consisted of some kind of fitted bodysuit and a pair of wrapped hands that suggested she intended to punch things rather than shoot them. Her hair was pulled back in a simple configuration. Her face bore no ritual scarring, no threat displays, no cybernetic enhancements. She looked, for all intents and purposes, like someone who should be organizing data files or possibly serving beverages, not standing in the crucible of Fang across from 400 kilograms of murder incarnate. In the commentator booth, suspended above the arena floor, Zrill of the 6th Tendril nearly choked on his nutrient supplement. Zrill had been commentating fights in the Crucible for 37 years. He had seen every kind of combat, every species, every weapon configuration imaginable. He had watched competitors enter the arena riding war beasts, piloting mechs, or simply walking in with enough natural weaponry to classify as a military threat. Never, not once in 37 years, had he seen something like this. His co-commentator, a Brenthian named Kos, who had 4 eyes and used all of them to stare at the human, finally broke the silence. "Is this a joke? Please tell me this is a joke." "I am checking the roster," Zrill said, his tendrils dancing across his datapad with increasing desperation. "It says here the challenger is listed as human, female, age 26 standard years, representing Earth. No title, no rank, no previous combat record in any registered arena." Previous combat record in any arena? Does she have any combat record at all? Zrill scrolled further. It says she has a certificate in something called mixed martial arts from an institution called Renzo's Gym in a city called San Francisco. What is a gym? How should I know? I assumed it was a military installation. Down on the betting floor, Hoften the bookmaker was having what humans would call a very bad day, and what his species called a terminal financial event. Within 30 seconds of the human entering the arena, his entire betting pool had collapsed. Nobody, and he meant nobody, was putting money on the human. The odds had shifted so dramatically that his systems had temporarily shut down trying to calculate them. He was currently looking at a situation where if Vexitharek won, which everyone knew he would, Hoften would lose approximately 40,000 credits in processing fees alone. He seriously considered closing the betting entirely, but that would raise questions with the Arena Commission. Questions he could not afford to answer. On the arena floor, the human had reached her designated starting position and was now doing something that appeared to be stretching. She bent forward and touched her toes. She twisted her torso from side to side. She rolled her shoulders in their sockets. The whole display took perhaps 45 seconds, and during that time, roughly 200,000 spectators watched in complete bafflement. Across from her, Vexitharek watched with something that might have been confusion if Korthax were capable of confusion. Mostly what he felt was irritation. He had been promised a worthy opponent for his 50th victory. Instead, he had been given this soft thing that looked like it might blow away in a strong breeze. This creature that was roughly the size of his leg and apparently thought stretching was an appropriate pre-combat ritual. He considered simply refusing to fight. It would be shameful, but less shameful than killing something this pathetic. Then again, killing was what he did. It was his purpose, his identity, his entire existence distilled into its purest form. And the creature had entered the crucible. That meant she had accepted the consequences. Fine. He would make it quick. The arena master, a Volgaran with cybernetic enhancements that made him look like a walking weapons catalog, activated the sound system. His voice boomed across the arena floor. Combatants ready. Standard crucible rules apply. Fight continues until surrender, incapacitation, or death. May the strongest survive. The barrier dropped. For exactly 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then Vexitharek moved. When a Korthax warrior charges, it is not a subtle thing. The arena floor shook. The air vibrated with the sound of 400 kilograms accelerating from standing to full sprint in less time than most species need to process visual input. Vexitharek crossed 15 meters in under a second. Lower arms spread wide to grab, upper arms pulled back to strike, jaw opening to reveal 3 rows of teeth that could shear through bone. The human ran away. Not strategically, not in any kind of tactical withdrawal pattern. She just turned and sprinted in the opposite direction like someone who had suddenly realized she had made a terrible life choice and was desperately trying to undo it. The crowd's tension broke. Relieved laughter rippled through the stands. Of course she was running. What else would she do? This was natural. This was right. This was the proper order of things reasserting itself after a momentary hiccup. Vexitharek pursued with something resembling satisfaction. Running only prolonged the inevitable. The arena was large, but it was not infinite. She would tire. She would stumble. She jumped, not away from him, not to the side, straight up, impossibly high. Caught a handhold on one of the environmental features scattered across the arena floor. Decorative rock formations meant to provide cover and tactical variety. And pulled herself up to the top in a motion so fluid it looked choreographed. Vexitharek skidded to a stop, claws tearing furrows in the sand. He stared up at the human, who was now standing on top of a rock formation, roughly 4 meters off the ground, hands on her hips, looking down at him. And she was smiling. Not the predatory smile of a warrior anticipating violence. Not the nervous smile of someone trying to mask fear. Just a regular smile. The kind someone might give after successfully completing a moderately difficult task, like parallel parking or assembling furniture. Okay, she said, her voice carrying across the arena floor with perfect clarity. Okay, I've got your patterns now. In the commentator booth, Zrill nearly fell out of his seat. Did she just say patterns? Patterns? He charged at her once. The human jumped down from the rock, not away from Vexitharek, toward him. What happened next would be analyzed, frame by frame, in military academies across the galaxy for the next 50 years. Vexitharek swung with his upper right arm, claws extended, a strike with enough force to decapitate a Brenthian war form. The human dropped into a slide, passing under the swing with maybe 3 centimeters to spare, sand spraying up behind her. She came out of the slide in a crouch, planted her left foot, and drove her right heel into Vexitharek's lower knee joint. The joint did not break. Korthak's physiology was too robust for that. But it bent backward approximately 6 degrees further than it was designed to bend, which in Korthak's biology triggered a reflex arc that caused every muscle in that leg to momentarily lock up. Vexitharek stumbled. Actually stumbled, the crowd went insane. The human did not press the advantage. Instead, she backpedaled, putting 10 meters between herself and the Korthak's champion, and resumed what appeared to be a casual observation stance. Vexitharek recovered quickly, rage now flooding through every neural pathway he possessed. He charged again, this time leading with his lower arms, intending to grab and crush. The human waited until he was within striking distance, then did something that defied every tactical manual ever written. She charged back, straight at him, full sprint, directly into the path of a creature that outmassed her by a factor of 6. At the last possible second, and it had to be the last possible second because Zrill checked the recording later and counted frames, she planted both feet and jumped again, but this time forward and up, hands reaching for Vexitharek's upper shoulders. She caught hold, used his own momentum to swing her body up and over, and landed on his back between his shoulder sets. Then she punched him in the back of the head. It was not a particularly powerful punch by Korthak standards. It probably did not even register on the pain scale. But it was insulting. Deeply, profoundly insulting. A creature that should be prey was riding him like a recreational mount and hitting him like a disobedient pet. Vexitharek reached back with both upper arms, trying to grab her. But she was already moving, sliding to his left side, out of reach. One of his claws caught her shoulder, tore through the bodysuit material, drew blood. The crowd gasped. The human looked at the wound, looked back at Vexitharek, and laughed. Actually laughed. A bright, genuine sound that echoed across the arena floor and made approximately 200,000 spectators question their understanding of combat psychology. "Oh," she said. "Oh, you are strong. Okay, yeah. I need to not let you grab me. Got it." She moved again, and this time there was no hesitation, no testing. She flowed around Vexitharek like water, always just out of reach, striking at joints, tendons, anything that looked like it might be a vulnerable point. Each strike was precise, each movement efficient. She was not trying to overpower him. That would be impossible. She was trying to disable him piece by piece, joint by joint. And it was working, not quickly. Korthak's physiology did not fail quickly. But Vexitharek could feel it, the accumulating damage, the joints that moved slightly less smoothly than before, the tendons that complained just a bit more with each movement. He was the superior warrior. He was the champion. He had 50 consecutive victories. So why was he breathing hard? Why was she not? The human darted in again, this time going for his lower right knee, the same one she had kicked before. Vexitharek anticipated this, swung low with his lower left arm, caught nothing but air as she pivoted at the last second, and drove her elbow into the joint from a different angle. The knee buckled. Vexitharak went down on one knee, caught himself with his lower arms, pushed back up. The human was already 10 meters away, hands on her knees, watching him with that same analytical expression. She was studying him, still. After 10 minutes of combat, she was still collecting data, still refining her approach. That was when Vexitharak realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. She was not tired. He was. Humans, it turned out, had one advantage that no amount of armor plating or natural weaponry could overcome. They were endurance hunters. On Earth, back when they were still figuring out the whole civilization thing, humans had hunted by simply following their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They could not run fast, not compared to the things they hunted. But they could run forever. They could regulate their body temperature through a mechanism called sweating that let them dump heat continuously while running. They could consume nutrition during movement. They could maintain pursuit for hours, sometimes days, until whatever they were chasing simply gave up and died. And they had never lost that ability. Vexitharak was the superior warrior. But this was not a sprint. This was not a single exchange of killing blows. This had become a marathon, and humans, ridiculous, soft, squishy humans, were built for marathons. The fight continued for another 20 minutes. Vexitharak landed hits, several of them. The human's bodysuit was torn in a dozen places. Blood ran down her left arm. Her right leg moved with a slight limp that suggested damaged muscles. But she kept moving, and Vexitharak kept slowing. The end, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. Vexitharak threw a combination strike, upper and lower arms working in concert, the kind of attack that had killed champions and ended wars. The human swayed back, not jumped, not dodged, just swayed, minimal movement, maximum efficiency. Let the claws pass 3 centimeters in front of her face, then stepped inside his guard and drove her fist into his solar plexus with every kilogram of body weight behind it. Korthax did not have solar plexuses exactly like humans did, but they had something analogous, a nerve cluster that controlled breathing rhythm. The strike disrupted the rhythm, just for a second. Just long enough for Vexitharak's next breath to catch, for his body to panic at the momentary lack of oxygen, for every muscle to tense simultaneously. The human swept his legs, all of them. A creature that massed 400 kilograms crashed to the arena floor like a demolished building, sand erupting in all directions, the impact registering on seismic sensors 3 levels down. The human was on him immediately. One knee on his chest, her wrapped fist pulled back, ready to strike his throat, his eyes, any of the dozen vulnerable points she had undoubtedly cataloged during their fight. She held the position, waited. "Yield," she said. Not a question, a statement. Vexitharak, the rendered, undefeated champion of the Crucible, winner of 50 consecutive matches, looked up at the human female kneeling on his chest and felt something he had not felt in 15 years. Fear, not of death. He had made peace with death long ago. Fear of something worse than death. The knowledge that he had been beaten not by superior strength or better weapons or even luck, but by simple, methodical competence. By someone who had studied him like a problem to be solved, and then had solved him. "I yield," he said. The arena exploded. Not literally, though given the station's history, literal explosion was not entirely off the table. But the sound that erupted from 200,000 spectators crashed over the arena floor like a physical force. Cheering, screaming, the sound of every preconception about humans being simultaneously destroyed and rebuilt. The human stood up, offered Vexitharak her hand. He stared at it for a moment. The hand was tiny, could not possibly lift his mass, then took it anyway. She did not lift him. Instead, she braced herself, provided a stable point for him to pull against, let him do the work of standing while she ensured he did not fall. It was, Vexitharak realized, the most respectful thing anyone had ever done for him after a fight. "Good match," she said, smiling again. "You are incredibly strong, made me work for it." She released his hand, turned, and walked toward the exit designated for victorious combatants, limping slightly, trailing blood, looking for all the universe like someone who had just completed a moderately strenuous workout rather than defeated the most dangerous warrior in 42 galaxies. In the commentator booth, Zril sat in silence for approximately 30 seconds. Then he activated his microphone with a tendril that shook so badly he nearly missed the button. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations," he said, his voice somehow conveying both shell shock and professional enthusiasm. "I believe we have just witnessed history." On the betting floor, Houghton stared at his datapad in complete horror. The numbers did not make sense. Could not make sense. The human had been at such long odds that the three people in a crowd of 200,000 who had placed money on her, were now looking at a payout that would bankrupt his entire operation. One of them, he noticed, was another human. A male who was now grinning like someone who had just pulled off the greatest heist in galactic history. Which, from a certain perspective, he had. Houghton did some quick calculations, determined that he could flee to a neighboring galaxy and establish a new identity with the credits he had left, and began making plans. In a private viewing box reserved for arena officials and important dignitaries, a Zeltharian military observer sat very, very still. She had been present at the first human contact 60 years ago. She had been one of the ones giggling at how ridiculous they seemed. She was not giggling now. She activated her communication array and sent a priority message to Zeltharian High Command with a simple subject line: "Reassess human combat capabilities immediately." The response came back within minutes: "Explain." She attached the fight recording and wrote, "They are endurance predators. We gave them 60 years to study us. They have been studying." Down in the medical wing, the human sat on an examination table while a Volgaran medic, who had seen every kind of combat injury imaginable and was therefore very difficult to impress, worked on her shoulder wound. "This will need regeneration treatment," the medic said. "The claw penetrated approximately 4 centimeters. You are fortunate it missed the major blood vessels." "Yeah, that was lucky," the human agreed. She looked tired now, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "How long for the treatment?" 3 hours. You should rest." "Can I get some food first? I am absolutely starving." The medic paused in his work. "You just fought Vexitharak the Rendered and won. You nearly died multiple times. And your primary concern is nutrition?" The human shrugged her uninjured shoulder. "Fighting burns calories, lots of calories. If I do not eat something soon, I will get shaky. Probably pass out. That would be embarrassing after winning and all." The medic had no response to this. He simply resumed treating her wounds while mentally composing a message to his colleagues in the xenobiology department, suggesting they significantly revise their human biology textbooks. 3 hours later, after regeneration treatment and consuming what the medic considered an alarming amount of protein, the human emerged from the medical wing to find a crowd waiting for her. Not a threatening crowd, security had ensured that, but definitely an interested one. Representatives from a dozen different species, all wanting to talk to her, hire her, study her, or possibly all three simultaneously. At the front of the crowd stood a human male, the same one who had been grinning on the betting floor. He was older, maybe 50 standard years, with gray in his hair and the kind of face that suggested he found most things amusing. "Nice work in there," he said. "Thanks. Are you my agent or something?" "Something like that. Name's Marcus. I run a small operation that scouts human talent for various galactic opportunities. Saw your application to the Crucible and thought it might be interesting to see what happened." "You bet on me." "I did. Made quite a bit of money, actually. Some of which I will happily share with you, minus a modest finder's fee." The human, whose name, for the record, was Riley Chen, though most of the galaxy would simply remember her as the human who beat Vex's Tharak, considered this. "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus told her. Riley blinked. "That is enough to buy a ship. A nice ship, or you could invest it, fight more matches. You are about to become very famous." "I was just trying to make rent." "Well," Marcus said, grinning, "you definitely accomplished that." Behind them, representatives from various species were still trying to get Riley's attention, offering contracts, endorsements, opportunities. One Korthax representative, not Vex Tharak, but someone equally large and intimidating, pushed to the front. "I wish to issue challenge," he announced. "You defeated Vex Tharak through luck and trickery. A true warrior would—" Riley turned and looked at him with an expression that could only be described as deeply, profoundly tired. "I will fight you," she said, "for twice what I just made, plus medical coverage, plus accommodations, plus meals, 3 a day, substantial portions, and you pay up front." The Korthax representative started to object, then stopped. Because standing there, looking at this small human female covered in fresh regeneration scars and radiating the kind of exhaustion that comes from having nothing left to prove, he suddenly understood something. She was not bluffing. She would fight him. She would probably win. And she would do it for money, because apparently humans viewed mortal combat as employment rather than honor. It was possibly the most terrifying realization of his life. "I will consult with my principals," he said, and backed away. Riley watched him go, then turned to Marcus. "I need sleep and food and possibly a vacation, in that order." "You just made enough money for a very nice vacation." "Good. I am thinking somewhere quiet. Maybe a station that does not have combat, arenas, or Korthax. Definitely no Korthax." They walked away from the crowd, security clearing a path. Behind them, the representatives argued among themselves about who had the right to approach her first, what contracts to offer, how to properly recruit a human warrior who had just rewritten the rules of galactic combat. The news spread quickly. Within hours, every major news network across 42 galaxies was running the footage. Within a day, human combat stocks had increased by 400%. Within a week, 36 species had formally requested permission to establish training exchanges with Earth, specifically requesting instructors in something called mixed martial arts. The galaxy's military academies began, quietly and with some embarrassment, revising their threat assessment protocols for human combatants. The previous rating of negligible was updated to extreme caution advised. Some academies went further, adding a note that would become infamous in military circles. If forced into combat with human opponent, end confrontation quickly or not at all. Humans are endurance predators. Extended engagement favors human victory. Back on Earth, at a place called Renzo's Gym in San Francisco, an instructor named Tommy was giving a regular class on grappling techniques when his datapad chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, blinked, read it again, then showed it to his assistant instructor. "Riley fought in the Crucible," he said, voice filled with disbelief. "Our Riley? Riley Chen, who comes to Tuesday and Thursday classes?" "Yeah, and she won. Beat some alien champion in front of 200,000 spectators." They stared at each other for a moment. "Huh," the assistant instructor said. "Good for her. Always said she had solid fundamentals." And really, that was the perfect summary of the entire situation. The galaxy had expected something dramatic, something that required genetic modification or advanced technology or divine intervention. Instead, they got a 26-year-old woman with solid fundamentals and the good sense to pace herself during a fight. As for Vexitheric the Rendered, he retired from the Crucible 2 weeks later. Not in shame, Korthax did not really do shame, but in recognition that his time had passed. He transitioned into teaching, eventually opening a combat academy that became famous for its unconventional approach. Rather than focusing purely on strength and aggression, it emphasized something Vexitheric had learned the hard way: strategy, efficiency, and the understanding that sometimes the scariest opponent is not the one with the most weapons, but the one who knows exactly how to use what they have. His academy's motto, translated from Korthax, read, "Respect the prey that studies you." It might not be prey anymore. And somewhere in the galaxy, probably on a nice quiet station without any combat arenas, Riley Chen was enjoying her vacation, completely unaware that she had accidentally terrified 42 galaxies by demonstrating the most human trait of all: the ability to treat impossible situations as merely difficult problems that required methodical solutions. The universe had spent 4 million years believing it understood the rules. Then one human with solid fundamentals showed up and politely suggested that maybe, just maybe, the rules needed revising.